So your father named you after him.
Yeah, so apparently I'm Douglas William Shan III. My grandfather was Douglas William Shan II.
Douglas Shan Road right now, you would access it to go into City Hall, to go into the courthouse, to go into the library. If you were going to the arena, if you're going to John Rennie, if you're going to the elementary school, to Terracotta, that's just the east little bit of Douglas Shan. The west bit of Douglas Shan takes you entirely into Cedar Park Heights, which is that whole area. So I just find it fascinating that I'm speaking to Douglas Shan. It's pretty amazing because as a John Rennie High School student, Douglas Shan is just a name that you know.
Yeah, I grew up with the name, so I'm kind of familiar with it. My parents immigrated to Australia in 1972, so I grew up in Valois till I was about 11.
Now, your father has how many siblings?
He had 3. He's Robert Shan. He had a brother, David Shan, and the eldest was his sister, Barbara Shan, who for a period of time was a teacher at Valois Park.
Was your mother from the West Island as well?
Her parents moved from, is it Verdun? Is it?
Yeah, that's a very popular.
Yeah, to Queens Road, and the Shans lived. Douglas William Shan, my grandfather, and my father and his brother and sister, they lived at 53 Prince Edward. So I guess that's where Dad and Mom sort of met in the neighborhood.
Valois was a really tight community, especially, I would say the boomers, but maybe just slightly older than the boomers. You know, the ones born between 35 and 45 in that era. Things were developing so much, and also this balance of farmland versus developed land, and also how far the next little town was, right? Because there was a Cool Breeze, which was a street where the next train station was, but it was only a single street. And then after that was the village. So it was this isolated town, that was just in the middle of kind of nowhere, that you had nothing over this way, what was the airport, and then nothing over this way. And you had your own little, on Donegany, your own little village. So for sure they knew each other from there. Okay, so your mom was from Valois as well. Your father, when they got married, they both chose to stay in Valois. How romantic.
Yeah, well, I think it was because my grandfather also owned the block of land next to 53 Prince Edward, which would become 51. That's where I grew up. So when he passed away in 56, I believe, Dad took that block of land and built a house on it. So he built it, and then he got married, and then of course my sister, who's a year older than me, she was born, and I was born in 1960. So, but even as you said before, Valois was an amazing place to grow up. I mean, we could go anywhere, and you're right, you came to a boundary. It was the fence to the golf course, or the fence to the airport, to the east. On the west, well, it was just, it was growing by then. Obviously the hospital was open and it was growing by then, but there was a major road going. So, we had boundaries. Like, I was allowed as a 7, 8, 9-year-old, to roam until it got dark, virtually anywhere. The only thing my mom says, do not cross those railway tracks, across the road from Donegany, but we did. Anyway.
So we had the first female city councillor in 1951, which was monumentous event for any district in Montreal. And she was from Valois. Her name is Olive Urquhart. When she wanted to become mayor, the person who followed her was Douglas Shan, another person from Valois who she knew very well. And so when she became mayor, he became councillor. And unfortunately, he didn't finish his first run. But let me tell you, in the year and a half or so that he was active, right, because he didn't finish his term because he fell ill.
Yeah.
The amount of stuff that he accomplished was unbelievable. And the reason why is because if you take any year from the decade of the 1950s, you would see a massive change in the development of Pointe Claire. He's in the picture for when they first started the fluoride in the drinking water. He's in that picture because he was one of the people in charge of that. When they first wanted to flirt with the idea of an industrial park, which became well known probably across Canada, he was one of the first guys in charge for seeing if this idea is even a possibility or a good idea. He was on the very first committee of that and in charge of it.
That's interesting. I didn't know those bits. He worked as a marketing manager for a pump manufacturer.
Yeah,
somewhere in Montreal.
I found documentation on that as well. The company that he was with.
Yeah, so the belief is from my grandmother, I mean, obviously she's passed away. The belief was that, hey, it was an industrial environment. Back in the 40s and 50s, they were manufacturing pumps, a lot of asbestos around, and he ended up getting asbestosis, or however you pronounce it, and that's where it came from. But yeah, no, I think he had an interesting life. Too bad it was cut short, but I think he lived it to the fullest.
I don't know if you saw, there was a video I produced about a train crash that happened in Valois. It was a major train accident. There was a flatbed that was going over the tracks, and for some reason it got stuck. And the train came and smashed it. There was a couple of pictures floating around Facebook about this accident, and I found the guy who took the pictures. He was shooting for the Lakeshore News at the time. He was a student. Right. He was walking down Prince Edward. He heard the whistle, heard the crash, and told his buddy, let's go. So they ran, and snapped a couple of pictures of the crash. So the interesting thing is where he developed those pictures that have been floating around.
As a matter of fact, when I got the pictures of that train wreck, it was Douglas Shan. He uses enlarger in his darkroom to print those pictures. Oh, he was a terrific photographer.
He developed them at Douglas Shan's darkroom.
Yes, right. Yeah, my grandfather was an avid photographer. We have a little bit of a collection there between myself, my mother, and my sister of some of his photographs. That's absolutely amazing. Yeah, because I never met him, obviously, only from what my mother, my father, and my grandmother told me. And I know he was a very creative guy. He was into photography. He was a reservist in 1941 for the RCMP, and we got a big photo of the division he was in, and he had his own band. Got a photo of him and unidentified others all playing musical instruments together. And so, I can only dream or think that he had a good life. He was smart, he was creative, and enjoyed life.
He was also a member, I think, of the Valois Citizens Association. So there's a lot of information there as well. And that was before he was a counselor. But another video that I did was about an epidemic that happened in Valois in 1950, where about 90% of the population fell ill because of enteritis. Now, I called someone who I was born in the late 30s. So I said, okay, well, maybe she has a memory of it. So I called her and I said, do you remember the epidemic that happened? And she says, remember it? She says, yeah, because when we got back to Valois, no one was outside. And we were driving into Valois and no one was outside. It was like a ghost town. Everyone was inside and they were sick.
Yeah, of course.
I said, oh, you were coming back from downtown? Or she goes, no, we were coming back from vacation. I said, where were you?
We were away. We were in the States at the sea in Martha's Vineyard. Because Douglas Shan, who's, the name Douglas Shan, the street? Yeah, well, he owned a cottage on Martha's Vineyard. So we would go there once a year.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I've been there. I mean, that's amazing.
It was last name was Machin.
Yeah. Reverend Machin. Yes.
Reverend Machin.
You're talking Valley United Church. Yeah, he actually married my parents.
There you go.
Cool.
So it just goes to show again, everyone was so close in Valois, thankfully, because I can get these stories straight.
Yeah.
But it's the second time that I was doing a story about something and your grandfather's name popped up. Not as a main part of the story, but it was just like like he was there, you know. What happened was I started to not see his name as much in the minutes. I think he was sick for a bit, and then he came back, and then when he got sick again or went back, he was ill again. He never came back. He passed away. And it was when he was still alive but ill is when they changed the name Atlanta Avenue, which is the west part of Douglas Shand, which stretches from St. John's all the way to the golf course, I believe. They changed the name to your grandfather's name when he was still alive, which is something that I'd never seen anywhere in the history books. So it just goes to show what kind of a guy he was, because they didn't wait until he passed away. Usually you wait until they pass away, they do a thing and they do a renaming. He was still alive. And then the short bit was still called St. John's at the time, because St. John's Curve, right? So before that got renamed Douglas Shand, it was renamed St. Louis. And then a little later on, it was named, they just continued it because it was kind of a straight line from the west side. And then they renamed that Douglas Shand. Also, he's in office for 1.5 years and he gets a street named after him.
Yeah.
Can you think of anyone today who would be in office for 1.5 years? 1.5 years. That's nothing now. And get a major street named after him.
He must have been
They weren't renaming many streets back then. The streets weren't that old.
Yeah, you're right. But he must have made such an impact on the community for them to do that. And obviously, you know, what you alluded to before, being part of the council and being a go-getter in the council, someone who did something. So, yeah, it must have made an impression.